this video, we'll discuss about minimum add to make parenthesis valid. So what the question says, a parenthesis string is valid if and only if it is the empty string. It can be written as AB, A concatenated with B, where A and B are valid strings, or it can be written as opening bracket A and closing bracket where A is a valid string. You are given a parenthesis string S. In one move, you can insert a parenthesis at any position of the string. Return the minimum number of moves required to make S valid. So what they are saying is that you are given a string which consists of only opening and closing parenthesis, and in any move you can insert one opening or closing bracket in this string to make this entire string as a valid string, and you need to return the minimum number of parentheses that you can add to make this string as valid. Now, what is a valid string here? See, for parentheses, for a valid string, there should always be equal number of opening and closing brackets, right? And the second condition is for each of them, this should be followed, meaning for every closing bracket, there should be an opening bracket, first thing, and for every opening bracket, there should be a closing bracket. Now, the second thing is that for every closing bracket, its corresponding opening bracket will always be to the left of it somewhere. And for every opening bracket, its corresponding closing bracket will always be towards the right of it somewhere, right? So these two conditions, if they are followed, then we can say that our string is a valid string. So whatever string is given to you, you need to apply these two conditions, and whatever is the minimum number of parentheses required to convert this invalid string into a valid string, that you need to return as your answer. So for example, if we see in this case, for this opening bracket, we have this closing bracket, right? This is forming a pair. But for this closing bracket, we do not have an open bracket here, right? So for this, we will have to add an opening bracket here, right? So in this case, our answer will be 1. Now if you see here, this is an opening bracket, this is an opening bracket, and this is an opening bracket. There are no closing bracket towards the right of it for all these three. So what I'll do, I'll add 3 closing brackets here and my string will become valid now, right? So for this, my answer will be 3. Now the first thought that comes in people's mind is that, okay, I'll count the number of opening brackets and the number of closing brackets present in my string, and whatever is their difference, that I'll return. That will be my answer. But that is wrong, right? We need to check for this condition also, that for every closing bracket, the opening bracket should be towards the left of it. It cannot be towards the right. This is not a valid string, right? And for every opening bracket, the closing bracket should always be towards the right. It should not be on the left. This is not a valid string, right? So, to understand it more better, just see this example. For this opening bracket, we have this closing bracket here, right? So this is valid. But for this closing bracket, we do not have an opening bracket here, right? And for this closing bracket also, we do not have any open bracket here. So for these two, you will add 2 opening brackets here, right? So your count will become 2 here. Now when you will come here, for these 2 opening brackets, we do not have any closing brackets on the right. So you will add 2 closing brackets here also. So in this case, your answer would be 4, the actual answer. But if you have applied this approach of open minus close, then what would be your answer? How many open brackets are here? 1, 2, and 3. And how many closing brackets are there? 1, 2, and 3. So in that case, your answer would have been 0. But the actual answer is 4. So we need to see for both the conditions, right? So what you will do, you will start from the starting, right? And you will check how many open brackets do I have and how many are required, right? I'll just remove this. So you will check how many open brackets are there and how many are required to make it balanced, right? So now as I said that for every opening bracket, you should have a closing bracket towards the right. Now when we are at this particular character, we do not know what is coming forward, right? So at this point, we cannot pair this open bracket with any other bracket, right? So we'll count it in this open variable, right? So this open will become 1. Now when we'll come here, this is a closing bracket, right? Now for a closing bracket, what is the condition? We need an opening bracket to the left. And to the left of it, whatever is present, that we have already traversed, right? So at this point, we can check that is this closing bracket can be compared with any other opening bracket or not. So if you see, we have one open bracket available, right? The value of open is 1. Then that means this one open bracket can be paired this closing bracket. So at this point, we'll decrease open by 1. So this much is sorted. Now when you will come here, we have encountered a closing bracket, but our open is 0. Then that means there are no opening brackets to the left of this closing bracket which are unmatched, right? So in that case, you will have to add an opening bracket for this. So you will increase your required by 1. Now what if there was an opening bracket available? So for example, if you see in this case, open is initially 0 and required is also 0. We'll start from here. Your open will become 1, right? And for next, your open will become 2. Then for this, your open will become 3. So now, at the end, if you will see that we have traversed the entire string, but we are still left with some open brackets which were not matched with any of the brackets, with any of the closing brackets, right? So for this also we need to add some closing brackets, right? So if I am left with 3 open brackets which are not matched, then that means I will have to add 3 closing brackets to form valid pairs, right? Because we should have equal number of opening and closing brackets. So then that means in this case for open, I will also have to add 3 closing brackets, right? My required was 0, but when I traverse the entire string, I'm still left with some open brackets. So that also needs to be considered. So basically, this required will tell you that for every closing bracket, how many opening brackets are required. And this number of opening brackets at the end of the string traversal tells us how many closing brackets are required for this open brackets, right? Let's see this example so it will be more clearer. So here open is 0 and required is also 0, right? Now if you will come here, your open will become 1. Then you will come here. This is a closing bracket. You will check, do I have an open bracket available? Yes, I have it available. So now I will use it, right? Then we'll move forward. We have a closing bracket. Now for this closing bracket, our open is 0. We do not have any open bracket. So I would need one open bracket, right? Then I come here. Now for this also again open is 0. I would need one opening bracket. So this will increase to 2. Now for this, now this is an opening bracket, right? So I will count it. Why are we counting here? Because in the future, we might get a closing bracket which can be paired with this. And if we don't get it, then at the end, we can count it and then we can add how many open brackets were unmatched, right? So for this, our count will become 1. Then again an opening bracket, so our count will become 2. So at the end, this open is denoting how many closed brackets should be added, and this required is denoting how many open brackets should be added. So whatever is open plus required, that is our answer. 2 plus 2 equals to 4. 4 is our answer, right? So what we are simply doing is that we are maintaining two variables, open 0 and required 0. Then we are iterating for every character in the string, right? And we are checking that if our character is an opening bracket, then you increment open. Else, if it is a closing bracket, then you check if you have open available. If open is greater than 0, then open minus minus. Else, we will need opening bracket, so required plus plus, right? And at the end, you can return required plus open, right? For this case also, you can check that opening will be 3 and required will be 0, right? So 3 plus 0 will give you 3. And for this case, your open will be 0 and required will be 1. So your answer will be 1. So now let's code this. So first of all, we'll create a open variable whose initial value will be 0 and a required variable whose initial value will also be 0. Then we'll look for every character in the string, right? And we'll check that if this character is an opening parenthesis, then you increment open. Else, if it is a closing parenthesis, then check. If I have open available to me, then I will decrement open. Otherwise, I will increment the required. And at the end, we will return open plus required. Right? So now let's run this. So in this case, we are only traversing in our string once, right? So our time complexity will be big O of n. Let's submit this. So it got accepted. Thank you so much for watching.